dragons. You know, that's funny. Like the Irish, though, swear, they see the fairies and the trolls and all that stuff. They swear they've
Actually,
seen
John's talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Being over in the UK, where that's a common thing, he's talked about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And it's with the pagan groups over there. It's really it's really a big deal. Like whenever we were talking, Summer, I mentioned about the well in that house.
Yeah.
If you had an open well that was underneath the house, that could have had something to do with pagan
We
beliefs.
did in the old house I used to live in, right under. It was under the living room, because they built the kitchen, or they built the living room out there and over it. So, and it was right under there. So we never really filled it in completely, but yeah.
Yeah, in the Creatures of Fairy chapter, it opens by saying the entities covered in this section are perhaps the most interesting and certainly among the strangest of all the monstrous beings we'll be examining. It's hard to sense this from the images and accounts in current popular culture, though. The beings known nowadays as fairies have suffered more at the hands of the Halloween consciousness of modern commercialism than any other of those diverse creatures we have called monsters.
Wow.
Well, and of course, it also suffered with the LGBTQS thing, or whatever the hell it is now. But this book was written before all that woke madness took hold. But and it goes on to say, the confusion begins. The confusion begins with the very terms we use. The word fairy or fairy comes from the Latin verb facere, to enchant, and actually means a state, condition, or realm of enchantment. The word fae, in turn, comes from the same root and means an enchanted or enchanting being. This is the term that will be used here for a creature or fairy. Both fae and fairy entered in the English language with the Normans, which invaded the modern day Britain back in 1066. That's why they're common there. Mm-hmm. And they came to be used as synonyms for two older English words, elf and elfhame.
Oh. But they're good. They're not like Krampus. Krampus is like a demonic figure, right? With the horns and the...
Yeah, elves aren't necessarily malevolent like the Krampus or the Wendigo or the Skinwalkers or what have you. The same degree of confusion appears in our culture's standard image of fays, or rather images, or even in their modern forms, the folk of fairy change shape easily and are unnervingly hard to pin down. The most common image of a fairy is a tiny human figure, usually female, with wings borrowed from one of the cuter flying insects. Pointed ears and sometimes little antennae curving up from the forehead serve as identifying markers. Clothing tends towards the fluffily medieval, sometimes a magic wand tipped with a star completes the kit.
There's fluffy what, chicks?
Fluffily medieval clothing. Worn by fluffy fairies.
That sounds sexy.
What's it's not really off the subject, but I was watching, of course, a lot of the stuff on YouTube about Diddy and Jay-Z and stuff is just crazy. Not all of it's true, of course. But I was watching this thing about Beyonce being a witch, and it was really kind of interesting. I think she has kind of different stuff like that in her routine, her music routine, and everything.
Well, Kanye, okay, that's one person that everybody always keeps forgetting about was Kanye West. Now he's openly admitted that there's a lot of stuff with MK Ultra and and the Illuminati going on in Hollywood. So there could be something going on with all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but you know what the problem is with him is he's ruined his credibility because he's done so many crazy things, and he was off his meds for a while. I think he's bipolar or something, but now he's okay. But I think there's some truth in there, and a lot of people are looking at it now saying, "Hey, he obviously wasn't off his rocker when he was talking about some of
well,
this
he
stuff."
could have been off his rocker. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, the thing of it is like there's a lot of things that you really got to take a look at now that that everybody laughed about before, especially with the day and age and the way things are going. Like Hollywood has always been crazy, but this new stuff that's happening in Hollywood is just off the freaking wall, dude. I mean,
Well, what's really scary? I watched this video about P. Diddy. It was just a little short one. And all the stuff they showed, I mean, it was like, how did we not know? Just like you'd watch him on a talk show and he'd say this. And I guess people always just kind of thought, kidding. But when you put it all together, it's like it's been there all along. The way he is, and it's been there all along, and everybody's like, oh, no big deal. Because it's like, it was like, it's like somebody doing something in a community and it's a police officer or something. They're right in the community and they're right underneath everybody's nose, but nobody knows it's them. They're doing something evil. Well, it's like him. It's like he just was right out there. Like in an interview with Justin Bieber, he's like, yeah, I've told Justin not to talk about what me and him do or something. I was like, and there it is. But at the time, I might even seen it, and I kind of
they had all these videos of him grooming Justin Bieber too. I mean, it was.
I know, but then I've seen a few of them, and I never ever thought anything about it. But I wasn't big into him. But I'd watch it, and I was like, oh, he's just kidding. No big deal. But now you look back on it. It's funny. I guess that happens with anything. You'll look back on stuff, and you're like, oh, now I understand why that person was acting that way or why that person said this. But, in front of you, you don't. So there's some of that.
Also, kind of think, too, about what we're talking about. I mean, we started talking about monsters. We started talking about fae and fairies and then, insatiable hunger. And it all just kind of led us to Hollywood and P. Diddy and Justin Bieber, and
Beyonce being there is where she does the show. She's dressed like a witch.
Well, I was told. Remember the other. Oh.
What?
I just said divination is all I said. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say it's weird too. Remember how we were talking about the other day about we were talking about Garth Brooks and P. Diddy and the whole Epstein thing and how we think it was all interrelated, Mom. Yeah. And then I mentioned how Ellen, you're talking about how Garth Brooks is trying to get a house over in Ireland, and I was saying that was weird because Ellen and her partner fled to England recently, and they blamed it on Donald Trump getting reelected. And then we started talking about that guy that DJ used to be on her show, Twitch.
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing about him is if you look at how he spelled his name, it was spelled in such a way as to imply witch. Like the T was lowercased, but then the W was uppercased. So it was like it was witch.
Where did he ever call himself that, I wonder? I never really looked that up.
I thought that was. And to tie the end of this conversation, I thought that was one of the things that struck me when I was reading the article about him, and how mysterious his death actually was. Because for years I thought it was just a suicide because he had years of mental issues and stuff and just finally gave up. But
did he? I don't think he did have any mental issues. Not Twitch.
No, not. I don't believe so now. When I read that article, that you sent me. You should link. I mean, you should probably, if you have that article, maybe give it to Roger to link in the description of this video, because that was a very, very interesting article, and it was interesting. But one of the things that struck me was it was interesting how he spelled his name, and it ties into the whole witchcraft occult thing in Hollywood too.
Yeah, I just wonder. There doesn't seem to be any reason why he killed himself, and they didn't say what the suicide note supposedly said. And his wife said he didn't have any issues with suicide, and they seemed happy together, or didn't have any depression issues. I don't know. The whole thing is still so strange.
Are you talking about Epstein himself?
I'm talking about the Twitch was one of this
yeah.
black man that was on Ellen. If you look him up, if you never watched their show, you wouldn't know him probably. He was a
DJ that was on Ellen's show the last couple seasons.
And he was he was on Dancing with the Stars, I think.
Yeah, he got famous through that, and then Ellen picked him up as a DJ on her show and a dancer on her show.
Now, see, I've actually been on another show with a guy by the name of Naroki 5, and we actually had a conversation about Ellen and about her old relationship with what's her face? I forgot her name, but she was real famous.
The one that died in the car wreck.
Right, now the car wreck.
It's going away from me too.
The
car. What's her name?
The whole situation behind that by itself was pretty suspicious. So, like,
wasn't her Anna something? I forget. Oh, go on. Sorry.
She ends up flipping out. People don't realize this, or they don't remember it for some reason, but she ends up flipping out, and she ran into like 3 different, maybe 4 different structures before she finally had a collision. Like, she literally flipped out and was racing down the street, slamming into shit. Okay.
Wow. And you know that there was another man that used to be on her show. Actually, he played an elf. This is funny, Austin. He played an elf.
Back to the creatures of fairy thing, huh?
Yeah, but
it's weird how all this stuff's interrelated.
And he used to play. Well, he's played on several shows, but he played on her show. He died the same year. He had a heart attack in his car and hit a wall. And somebody said he was going to get a prescription that day. I mean, he was in his 60s, but he seemed like he was in pretty good health. And then, he passed away. And there was Twitch, and there was her Anne Heche, isn't it? Yeah, Anne Heche, Twitch, and then this little guy. So, and everybody was like, oh my God, why are these people around Ellen dying? So, but I don't know that she had anything to do with it. I kind of, at that time.
Well, I mean, of course, you're not going to hear her having anything to do with it. I mean, who you know what I mean? Nobody in their right mind, or supposed right mind, is going to say, there's a little bit of witchcraft involved in this stuff. So,
Yeah.
I know that Twitch and her were really close. That she would take vacations with him and his wife and the kids. They had kids, him, Twitch and his wife. They were pretty tight. And that was so weird. Like I said, he ended up committing suicide in a hotel room where he shot himself. And that's always, that method of suicide, I don't know how sure you always are. Maybe if you're a good detective, you never know. Sometimes it can be homicide.
Now we need to be careful, because we don't want to scare a bunch of these little girls. You guys do know, like, this is the first episode you guys are doing on Kick, right?
Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know what the demographic of the site was.
Well, I mentioned it on the Operation Secret Santa Claus. Like, we got some pretty tough competition, so it's a lot of them are the